Welcome to a new episode of Edu Diabetes in English. I am Edu Rodrigues, a pharmacist, biochemist, and diabetes educator. I have been living with type 1 diabetes for over 25 years and dedicate my life to helping people like you understand how to prevent and reverse type 2 diabetes through clear, practical, and science-based information. Today, I want you to stay with me until the end because this episode is special. It's not a short video with quick tips. It's a complete journey, like a deep conversation between us, where we will talk about metabolic surgery, medications, nutrition, real cases, myths and truths, and also about a very special food that can make a difference in your health. I want to start with a direct question. Have you ever heard that the only way to reverse type 2 diabetes is through surgery? Many doctors no longer call it just bariatric surgery. Now they use a more appealing name, metabolic surgery. It sounds more modern, seems safer, but is it really the ultimate solution? I know that many of you, or perhaps someone in your family, have already heard this recommendation. And my role here is not to condemn anyone or judge medical decisions. My role is to provide clarity. I want to show you what is behind these proposals and, above all, teach you that there is a less invasive, safer, and much more effective long-term path, a change in your lifestyle, especially in your diet. Metabolic surgery basically involves modifying your stomach and intestines so you can eat less and absorb fewer nutrients. Yes, many people lose weight quickly after surgery and temporarily improve their glucose levels. But what almost no one tells you is that this procedure is not magical. It has risks, complications, and most importantly, it does not address the root of the problem. I ask you, if in the end you will still have to change your way of eating, why not start right there, without undergoing invasive, painful, and costly surgery? I have seen patients who, after surgery, suffered from vitamin deficiencies, hair loss, skin problems, weakened immunity, even depression. People who thought they had found the definitive solution, but who regained the weight and also their diabetes shortly afterward. So, here is the reflection I want you to take from this first section. Surgery can be a tool in very specific cases, but it will never be the smartest or safest solution for most people with type 2 diabetes. The true path is understanding what causes insulin resistance and how to reverse it through diet and lifestyle. And you, what do you think about metabolic surgery? Do you believe it's worth taking on so many risks? Leave me your thoughts in the comments because I want to hear about your experience and your point of view. Now I want to discuss a topic that is surely part of the lives of many who are watching me, diabetes medications. You probably know someone who takes metformin, or maybe you take it yourself. Others use Forxiga, gliclazide, or even insulin. And the question everyone has in mind is, do these medications really cure diabetes? The answer is clear, no. Medications help control blood glucose, but they do not address the root of the problem, which is insulin resistance. That's why I always say they are crutches, temporary supports, but not the definitive solution. Let me explain in a simple way how the three most well-known medications work. The first is metformin, also called glucophage in some countries. It is the most prescribed medication worldwide for type 2 diabetes. It mainly acts on the liver, reducing the production of glucose that the liver releases into the blood. That's why it helps lower fasting glucose levels. Additionally, it also slightly improves insulin resistance. It is a relatively safe medication, although it can cause digestive discomfort and, in the long term, vitamin B12 deficiency. Is it useful? Yes, it can help. Does it cure diabetes? No. The second very popular medication is Forxiga, whose scientific name is dapagliflozin. It works in a completely different way. It forces the kidneys to eliminate excess glucose through urine. That is, the glucose in your blood exits through your pee. Sounds practical, right? But there are also side effects. Some people suffer from urinary or genital infections because the excess sugar in the urine promotes the proliferation of fungi. Additionally, like metformin, it does not address the root cause of the problem. It only helps to temporarily lower blood sugar levels. And then there is gliclazide, which for me is the most dangerous of the three. Why? Because it forces the pancreas to work harder than normal, producing more insulin. In the short term, glucose levels drop, but over time, This excessive effort tires out the pancreas, which begins to fail. It's like forcing an old engine to run at maximum capacity every day. Eventually, that engine breaks down. And what was once a person with a still functional pancreas becomes someone insulin dependent. Additionally, glycoside can cause severe hypoglycemia, which are sudden drops in blood sugar, very dangerous. I want you to understand something fundamental. None of these medications were created to reverse diabetes. All were designed to control symptoms, not to address the cause. The cause of type 2 diabetes lies in insulin resistance, and insulin resistance is mainly fueled by excess carbohydrates in the diet. That's why I always repeat, the best medicine is not in the pharmacy, it's on your plate. And that's what I will show you in the next segment. But first, I want to ask you a question. What medications do you or a family member use for diabetes? Have you experienced side effects? Have you noticed that the dose increases over time? Tell me in the comments, because your experience can help others going through the same thing. The time has come to talk about what I believe is the most powerful part of this program. Because after understanding what metabolic surgery does and what medications do, the big question is, what really works to reverse type 2 diabetes? And the answer is clear: nutrition. More specifically, a low-carbohydrate diet known as a low-carb diet. I want you to understand something very important. Type 2 diabetes does not appear overnight. It is the result of many years in which the body was receiving more sugar and more carbohydrates than it could handle. Bread, rice, pasta, juices, sodas, cookies, candies. All of this causes blood glucose spikes, and the pancreas responds by producing more and more insulin. Over time, the cells stop responding well to that insulin. This is when insulin resistance appears, and then diabetes follows. So, what is the logic? If excess carbohydrates are the fuel that feeds the fire of diabetes, the most direct way to extinguish that fire is by reducing carbohydrates. And I want to make something clear here. I am not talking about starving yourself or living on a strict and boring diet. Low-carb eating is not restriction. It is smart substitution. It's choosing foods that truly nourish, that do not spike glucose, and that allow you to eat with pleasure. Let me give you practical examples. Instead of white bread for breakfast, you can make homemade bread with almond flour or seeds. Instead of rice for lunch, you can use grated and sautéed cauliflower. Instead of sugary sodas or juices, you can drink sparkling water with lemon or unsweetened infusions. And most importantly, you can eat proteins and healthy fats without fear. Meat, fish, eggs, avocado, nuts, cheese. All of this is part of a diet that not only controls, but reverses insulin resistance. Now, I want to share with you the 3 major benefits of a low-carb diet. First, it quickly lowers blood glucose, often within days. I have seen patients whose fasting glucose was much more stable after just a week. Second, it protects the pancreas because it reduces the need to produce so much insulin. It's like giving a break to an overworked engine. Third, it helps not only with diabetes, but also with other metabolic problems such as hypertension, fatty liver, high triglycerides, and excess weight. Some people ask me, Edu, does this work forever or is it just a passing trend? My answer is, it works forever if you understand it as a new lifestyle, not as a temporary diet. The idea is not to spend 3 months eating differently and then go back to the same lifestyle that led to the problem. The idea is to learn to eat differently, to discover new flavors, new recipes, new combinations. It's a mindset change. And here comes a reflection. Many people believe that changing their diet is harder than undergoing surgery. I don't see it that way. Surgery is invasive, carries risks, and leaves lifelong scars. Low-carb eating, on the other hand, gives you more energy, more control, better health, and over time, more freedom. I want you to think about this. If in the end you're going to have to change what you eat, wouldn't it be smarter to start there? And now I ask you directly, have you tried a low-carbohydrate diet? How was your experience? What was the most difficult and what was the easiest for you? Tell me in the comments, because your story can inspire others who are looking for motivation to take the first step. I love this section because it's when you directly participate in the program. Every comment you leave below is an opportunity to answer questions that are not only yours, but also for thousands of people who are in the same situation. The first question comes from Maria, who says, "Is grape juice healthy for a diabetic?" Maria, this is an excellent question because many people believe that, being natural, fruit juice is always good. But the reality is different. Grape juice, like orange juice, is loaded with fructose. Fructose is a type of sugar that goes straight to the liver and greatly increases insulin resistance. In a person without diabetes, it may not be as problematic, but in someone with type 2 diabetes, it's like pouring gasoline on a fire. So my advice is clear: avoid juices, even if they are natural. Eat whole fruit occasionally, but not concentrated juice. The second question is from Juan. What bread can a person with diabetes eat? One, there's a lot of confusion here because some professionals say that whole wheat bread is a good option. The problem is that whole wheat bread, gluten-free bread, or even light bread have a glycemic index almost as high as white bread. In other words, they raise blood sugar just as much. What I recommend to my patients is to prepare low-carb breads at home using flours like almond, coconut, or seed flour. It's not that you can never enjoy bread again, but you need to choose a recipe that doesn't spike your blood sugar. I myself teach several easy and delicious recipes because I know bread is very present in everyone's life. The third question comes from Carmen. Doctor, I am diabetic, but I don't like vegetables. What can I do? Carmen, I understand you perfectly. Not everyone enjoys eating vegetables, and it's not about forcing you to eat what you hate. The important thing is to reduce carbohydrates. If you don't like vegetables, you can base your diet on proteins and healthy fats. Meat, fish, eggs, cheeses, nuts. Of course, it's ideal to find at least some vegetables you tolerate, but it's not a strict rule. The key is to cut the carbohydrates that harm your metabolism. Pedro's fourth question is, if I stop taking metformin, will my glucose go back up? Pedro, the most important thing here is to understand why your glucose decreased. If it only dropped thanks to the medication, it's most likely to go back up when you stop it. But if it decreased because you changed your diet, then you can maintain control even without the medication. That's why I always say, metformin can be a support, but the real change is on your plate. The fifth question comes from Anna. Can a diabetic eat beans? Anna, this is a very common question. Beans are considered healthy in the traditional diet, but for a person who wants to reverse diabetes, they are not the best choice. Although they contain fiber and proteins, they also have a high carbohydrate load. This means they significantly raise blood glucose levels. In the initial phase of reversing type 2 diabetes, my recommendation is to avoid them. Later, in a maintenance phase, some patients may reintroduce them in moderation. And I want to close this section with Teresa's question. Does reversing diabetes mean I can eat whatever I want again? Teresa, this is everyone's big question. The answer is yes and no. Yes, because if you manage to reverse your diabetes, you'll have more freedom. But it doesn't mean returning to the same diet that made you sick. It's like a person who quit smoking. There's no point in celebrating their health by smoking again. What you can do is enjoy an occasional dessert, a special meal on an important date, without guilt, because your metabolism will already be healthier. But the foundation of daily life should continue to be a low-carbohydrate diet. And now I would like to ask you, who are watching, what questions do you have about your diet or your treatment? Write them below because in upcoming programs, I will answer more questions from the community. Your participation makes this space much richer and more useful for everyone. I want to share with you now something that, for me, is the most valuable. The real cases of people who managed to reverse type 2 diabetes by changing their diet and lifestyle. Because one thing is to hear theory, and quite another is to see concrete results. The first case is Marta, a 66-year-old woman. When she came to me, she was already taking 2 medications, metformin and Forxiga. Even so, her results were not good. Her glycated hemoglobin was at 5.9, her fasting glucose at 114, her triglycerides at 117, and her HDL at 64. In other words, she was still in a pre-diabetic state with insulin resistance. We decided to make a profound change in his diet, drastically reducing carbohydrates and adjusting proteins and healthy fats to his metabolism. Less than a month later, he repeated the tests. The glycated hemoglobin didn't decrease much because it reflects the last 3 months, but fasting glucose dropped 11 points. His triglycerides also began to decrease, and the most impressive was his HDL, which increased from 64 to 87 in less than 30 days. This is a very clear sign that insulin resistance was easing. And the best part, all of this without the need to increase medications, only through diet. The second case is Carlos, a 72-year-old man. He arrived at my consultation taking only Forxiga, but his doctor had already prescribed insulin. Upon reviewing his tests, I saw that his C-peptide, a test that shows how much insulin the pancreas produces, was at 0.78, well below the ideal value. That meant his pancreas was already very tired. I recommended following the medical advice to use insulin because in your case, it was necessary to give your pancreas a rest. At the same time, we worked on your personalized low-carb diet. The result? Months later, your C-peptide rose to 1.46. This means your pancreas regained some of its capacity. And most importantly, your glucose and glycated hemoglobin improved significantly. In this case, insulin was a support, but what made the difference was the diet. These two examples show something fundamental. Each person is unique. There is no one-size-fits-all solution. Some will need medication for a while, others even insulin. But the common factor in all successful cases is the same: proper low-carbohydrate diet tailored to each person's metabolism. I want you to imagine yourself in a situation like this. Think about what it would be like to see your tests improve month by month. Think about how it would feel to have more energy, naturally lose weight, and stop relying on so many pills. This is possible. It's not theory, it's not a dream. These are results I see every week in people who decide to change their lifestyle. And now I ask you, what would your life be like if you managed to reverse diabetes? Write it in the comments. I want you to put that dream into words because writing it down is the first step to making it a reality. I want to pause for a moment so you can clearly understand what is happening inside your body when we talk about type 2 diabetes. Because many times we hear words like insulin resistance or hyperglycemia, and they sound complicated. But in reality, if we explain it simply, it all makes a lot of sense. Imagine insulin as a key and each cell in your body as a door. When you eat carbohydrates, they are converted into glucose, which is energy. For that glucose to enter the cells, insulin uses its key and opens the door. What happens in type 2 diabetes? That lock begins to fail. Insulin knocks on the door, but the door doesn't open properly. That is insulin resistance. The sugar remains circulating in the blood instead of entering the cells. The pancreas, which is the organ that produces insulin, tries to compensate by making more keys. It can manage this for years, but eventually it runs out. That's when the first diagnoses appear: prediabetes and then type 2 diabetes. Now, let me tell you something very interesting. There are epigenetic studies that show that, even if you have predisposition genes for diabetes, you are not doomed to develop it. Genes are like switches. Some turn on and others turn off depending on your lifestyle. If you eat properly, exercise, and take care of your sleep, you can keep the genes that favor diabetes turned off. That is, it's not just what you inherit, but what you do with what you inherit. And here's another curiosity. When a mother has diabetes during pregnancy, she transmits mitochondria to her child that are already born with some difficulty managing glucose. That means the baby already has a negative advantage in metabolism. But once again, lifestyle can correct that. Your story is not set in stone. Let's now get practical. How does all this translate into your daily life? If you have white bread with jam and a glass of juice for breakfast, your glucose spikes like a rocket. Insulin rises, but your cells don't respond well. Instead, if you have eggs with avocado and black coffee for breakfast, glucose remains stable, insulin doesn't need to rise as much, and your body starts working in favor of your health. If you eat rice, potatoes, or pasta at lunch, the glucose spike is immediate. But if you switch to a salad with olive oil, grilled chicken, and cheese, the response is completely different. You don't get the glucose rush, you feel full for longer, and your pancreas gets a rest. Even something as simple as the drink matters. Many people think, I stopped drinking soda, now I drink natural juice. But natural juice, as I already explained, is almost as harmful because it contains a lot of fructose. The best options will always be water, sparkling water, infusions, or unsweetened coffee. I want you to also think about something broader. Diabetes not only affects the body, but also emotions. Many people tell me, Edu, I know what I should eat, but I just can't do it. And I respond, of course, because food is not just biology. It's also memory, culture, affection. It's not just about willpower, but about understanding the mechanisms and finding alternatives that you enjoy. That's why I always say, it's not enough to prohibit, you have to substitute. A person who has always had bread with cheese for breakfast won't stop doing so overnight if you don't give them an equally delicious option. That's why I teach recipes for low-carb bread, sugar-free desserts, flavorful dishes that don't spike glucose. Because the secret is to turn healthy eating into a pleasurable experience, not a punishment. And here is a cultural reflection. Did you know that in the 1950s, type 2 diabetes was much rarer than it is today? What changed since then? It wasn't our genetics, because genetics take thousands of years to change. What changed was the diet. The industry filled supermarkets with ultra-processed products, rich in sugar and refined flours. Sugary drinks, breakfast cereals, cookies, snacks. All of this became normal, but it is abnormal for our bodies. We are designed to eat real foods, not to live on packages and boxes. I want you to take this message. Your body is not broken, it is overloaded. When you remove that overload, when you reduce carbohydrates and choose real foods, the body begins to heal. I have seen this again and again. Glucose levels drop, triglycerides decrease, HDL rises, energy returns. It's not magic, it's physiology. And now I want you to tell me, what is the food that is hardest for you to give up? Bread, rice, sweets, juices? Write it in the comments, because I want to prepare upcoming videos with specific alternatives for each case. So far, we've talked a lot about nutrition because it is the foundation of everything. But I want you to understand that reversing type 2 diabetes is not just about what you put on your plate. There are other equally important pillars: physical activity, rest, emotional management, and the support of those around you. Let's start with physical activity. Many people believe that exercising means spending hours in a gym or running marathons. That's not the case. The most powerful movement for a diabetic can be as simple as walking after eating. Why? Because when you walk, your muscles use glucose directly as energy without needing as much insulin. It's like opening a second door for the sugar to leave the blood. Studies show that a 20 to 30 minute walk after meals can significantly reduce glucose spikes. Of course, I also recommend strength exercises, such as lifting weights or using your own body weight. The reason is simple. The more muscle you have, the more glucose your body can safely store. Muscle is like an extra tank for storing energy. That's why I say, muscle is medicine. Now let's talk about sleep. Few people associate rest with diabetes, but the truth is that poor sleep can increase insulin resistance even in healthy individuals. If you spend several nights sleeping little, your body begins to behave like that of a pre-diabetic. Imagine the effect on someone who already has the problem. That's why taking care of sleep quality is just as important as taking care of your diet. Sleeping in a dark environment, avoiding screens before bed, maintaining regular schedules, all of these influence your glucose levels. The third pillar is emotional management. Chronic stress raises cortisol, the stress hormone, and excess cortisol increases blood glucose. That's why some people say, Edu, but I ate well and my glucose was still high. Many times, it's not the food, it's the stress. It could be a family argument, work problems, constant worries. Your mind and body are connected. Breathing techniques, meditation, prayer, relaxing hobbies, everything that helps reduce your stress also helps your glucose. And last but not least, the support of family and friends. I have seen patients achieve impressive changes when their partner, children, or friends decide to accompany them. And I have also seen the opposite. People who fail because at home everyone continues eating bread, pasta, and sweets, and the temptation is too strong. Diabetes does not only affect the diagnosed individual, it affects the entire family. And when the family understands this and decides to join the change, the results are much more solid and lasting. I want you to reflect with me. How is your environment today? Does your family support you or sabotage you? Don't blame yourself if you feel alone on this journey, because it is very common. But I invite you to share this video with them. Have them watch it with you. Let them hear the same information. Because when everyone understands that the change is to gain health and quality of life, it's easier to walk together. In summary, nutrition, movement, rest, emotional management, and family support. These are the 5 pillars that, together, can transform your life. None are perfect on their own, but when combined, they create real, deep, and sustainable change. And now I want to ask you, which of these pillars is the most difficult for you? Food, exercise, sleep, stress, or environment? Tell me in the comments, because in upcoming videos, I want to bring practical strategies to help you in each of them. Now I want to do something different. Let's play myth or truth. I will present very common statements about diabetes and nutrition, and I will clearly explain whether they are true or false. First statement, orange juice is a healthy option to replace soda. Myth. Orange juice has almost the same amount of sugar as a soda. The difference is that this sugar comes in the form of fructose, which is even more harmful because it goes straight to the liver. For a person with diabetes, orange juice is like a liquid sugar syrup. The best options are always water, sparkling water, unsweetened tea, or coffee. Second statement, eating whole wheat bread is safe for a diabetic. Myth. Whole wheat bread, rye bread, or even light bread have a very similar glycemic impact to white bread. The fiber difference is not enough to protect a diabetic. Glucose levels rise the same. Therefore, if you want to eat bread, the only real option is to make it at home with low-carb flours. Third statement, eggs increase bad cholesterol. Myth. For years, we were told that eggs were dangerous because of their cholesterol. Today, we know that the body produces cholesterol in the liver and adjusts that production based on what we eat. If you eat more cholesterol, your liver produces less. If you eat less, your liver produces more. Additionally, eggs contain high-quality proteins and essential nutrients. It is a safe and healthy food for most people, including diabetics. Fourth statement, red meat, especially with fat, clogs the arteries. Myth. Recent scientific evidence shows that saturated fat is not the culprit of cardiovascular diseases. What damages the arteries is excess sugar and insulin circulating in the blood. Chronic inflammation caused by refined carbohydrates is much more dangerous than eating fat from meat. Fifth statement, weight training is better than aerobic exercise for a diabetic. True. Aerobic exercise, like walking or running, helps in the short term because it lowers glucose levels while you do it. But weight training, by increasing muscle mass, improves insulin sensitivity in the long term. The ideal is to combine both, walking or cycling several times a week and also strength training to protect muscles and metabolism. Sixth statement, someone who doesn't eat carbohydrates has no energy. Myth. Energy doesn't depend solely on carbohydrates. The body has nearly unlimited reserves of fat that can be used as fuel. The thing is, if you eat carbohydrates all the time, your body never learns to use that fat. With a low-carb diet, you teach your metabolism to use fat as high-quality energy. Seventh statement, protein damages the kidneys. Myth. The main enemy of the kidneys is not protein, but poorly controlled diabetes and hypertension. In a person with healthy kidneys, a diet rich in protein does not cause harm. Only in cases where there is already renal failure should protein intake be limited, always under medical guidance. Eighth statement, the low-carb diet is the best strategy for diabetics. True. Today, there are dozens of studies showing that a low-carbohydrate diet is the most effective intervention to improve insulin resistance and reverse type 2 diabetes. It is not a trend, it is science. And when that diet is tailored to each person's metabolism, the results are even better. I want to talk to you now about some topics that are rarely discussed in depth, but are essential to understanding type 2 diabetes and how to face it. First, let's talk about nutritional deficiencies. Many people who undergo bariatric or metabolic surgery end up with absorption problems. Imagine that your body needs iron, vitamin B12, calcium, magnesium, proteins. If it doesn't absorb them well, even if you eat, you remain malnourished. This is called functional malnutrition. You eat, but your body doesn't utilize it. So what happens then? Hair loss, brittle nails, dry skin, fatigue, depression, and even lowered immunity. I have seen patients who, after surgery, had constant infections because their immune system was weakened. And the saddest part, many of these problems are irreversible. That's why I say that if you can avoid surgery through a lifestyle change, that is always the best path. Now, let's go back to the medications. We have already discussed metformin, Forxiga, and gliclazide. But there is something more, the cumulative effect of so many drugs. Because the truth is that a diabetic rarely takes just one medication. They take one for glucose, for blood pressure, for cholesterol, for sleep, for pain. And each of these medications has side effects. For example, statins, which are used to lower cholesterol, can cause muscle pain and affect the liver. Antihypertensives, in some cases, can cause dizziness and fatigue. The problem is not a single medication, but the sum of all of them. In the end, the person doesn't know if the symptoms they have are due to the disease or the medications. Here I want you to reflect, how much does maintaining this circle cost? Not just in money, but in quality of life. And speaking of money, there is another key point. The costs of diabetes are extremely high. Hospitalizations, consultations, medications, complications like dialysis, surgeries, amputations. All of this amounts to billions for healthcare systems. Imagine if part of that money were used for educational campaigns about nutrition and prevention. How many lives could be changed? The reality is that it is much cheaper to prevent and reverse with lifestyle than to pay for medical complications. I also want to talk to you about something that deceives many people, the fallacy of what is natural. They tell me, Edu, I don't eat sugar, I only use honey. Or, I use brown sugar because it's healthier. Or, I drink fruit juice, not soda. Let me tell you very clearly, for your body, sugar is sugar. It doesn't matter if it comes in the form of organic honey, coconut sugar, or panela. All raise your glucose levels and all worsen your insulin resistance. The same goes for fruit juices. Just because something is natural doesn't mean it's safe for a diabetic. It's important to remove that illusion from your mind. Another essential topic is the difference between controlling and reversing. Controlling means maintaining blood glucose within an acceptable range thanks to medication or temporary adjustments. Reversing means addressing the root of the problem and having your tests return to normal levels without relying on drugs. Most medical guidelines refer to diabetes control because they assume it is a chronic and progressive disease. I say otherwise, yes, it is chronic, but it can be reversed. And that is a truth that changes everything. When you understand that reversal is possible, you stop feeling condemned and start making decisions with hope. Finally, I want you to think about the social and family impact. When a person has poorly controlled diabetes, they don't just suffer. Their family also suffers. The children who see their mother losing her sight. The husband who accompanies his wife to dialysis 3 times a week. The wife who fears that her husband might face an amputation. Diabetes is not an individual problem, it is a family and social problem. But the opposite is also true. When a person decides to change and begins to reverse the disease, the whole family benefits. More energy, more vitality, more joy. I have seen entire families transform their eating habits because one of them decided to take the first step. And now I want to ask you, which of these truths resonates most with you? The risks of surgery, the effects of medications, the deception of natural sugar, the economic cost, or the impact on the family? Leave it in the comments because I want to know where you are and what you need to hear more of in upcoming episodes. One of the saddest things I see as a diabetes educator is that most people discover their problem when the disease is already advanced. They tell me, Edu, but I felt fine, I never had symptoms, and suddenly I was diagnosed with diabetes. And the truth is that type 2 diabetes begins many years before the official diagnosis appears. That's why I want to teach you how to identify the early signs of insulin resistance and what tests you should ask your doctor for so you don't wait until it's too late. Let's start with the symptoms that the body gradually shows. One of the first signs is constant fatigue. No matter how much you sleep, you always wake up without energy. This happens because glucose is in the blood, but it doesn't enter the cells properly. It's like having fuel in the tank, but with a broken key. Another sign is frequent hunger. You eat and shortly after, you're hungry again, especially craving carbohydrates or sweets. This is also typical of insulin resistance. Your body can't use energy properly, so it asks for more. Visible physical changes also appear. The accumulation of fat in the abdominal area, even in people who are not obese, is a clear sign. And something very characteristic, dark spots on the neck, armpits, or elbows. This is called acanthosis nigricans, and it is a direct sign of insulin resistance. Now let's talk about laboratory tests. The first is fasting glucose. Many times, the doctor only considers this value, but the truth is that it can be normal for years while insulin resistance is already progressing. The second is glycated hemoglobin, HbA1c, which shows the average of your glucose over the past 3 months. It is more comprehensive than fasting glucose, but it may still not detect the initial stages. The third test, which few doctors order but is essential, is C-peptide. This measures how much insulin your pancreas is producing. If it is very high, it means your body is fighting against resistance. If it is very low, it indicates that your pancreas is already exhausted. Another key test is fasting insulin. Along with fasting glucose, you can calculate the HOMA-IR index, which is one of the best indicators of insulin resistance. Often, glucose levels are at 90 or 95, values that seem normal, but insulin is very high. That already indicates resistance, even if the doctor hasn't yet said you have diabetes. And we cannot forget triglycerides and HDL. If triglycerides are high and HDL is low, that almost always signals insulin resistance. Let me give you a practical example. Imagine a patient with a fasting glucose of 95, hemoglobin A1c of 5.5, triglycerides of 200, and HDL of 35. What will most doctors say? Everything is normal, just watch your diet a bit. But the truth is that this patient already has very advanced insulin resistance. If they don't change their lifestyle, in a few years they will be diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. Do you see the difference? It's not enough to look only at glucose. You need to understand the whole picture. That's why I always recommend that even if your tests seem normal, pay attention to your body and request more comprehensive studies. Because the sooner you detect insulin resistance, the easier it is to reverse it. And here I ask you a direct question. Have you ever reviewed your tests with this perspective? Do you know your C-peptide, your fasting insulin, your triglycerides? Tell me in the comments, because I want to know where you stand and help you interpret them in upcoming videos. I want you to understand something very important. Diabetes is not just a blood sugar problem. It is a disease that, if not controlled and reversed, gradually affects all the organs in your body. And I will explain it to you simply, so you see it clearly. Let's start with the liver. The liver is like the central factory of your metabolism. When there is insulin resistance, the liver begins to accumulate fat. This is called fatty liver, and today it is one of the most common conditions in people with type 2 diabetes. Fatty liver can progress to inflammation, fibrosis, and even cirrhosis. And the most incredible thing is that often it shows no symptoms until it is very advanced. Now let's move on to the heart and blood vessels. Excess glucose and insulin in the blood damage the walls of the arteries. It's as if they gradually lose flexibility and become filled with small scars. This paves the way for atherosclerosis, which are plaques of fat and cholesterol that block the arteries. That's why diabetics have a much higher risk of heart attack and stroke. It's not just a number and a test, it's life itself at stake. Let's continue with the kidneys. The kidneys are delicate filters that clean your blood. When there is too much glucose, these filters work overtime and become damaged over time. This is called diabetic nephropathy, and it can lead to the need for dialysis. Can you imagine having to go to a hospital 3 times a week for a machine to do what your kidneys can no longer do? That is a reality for millions of people, but it can be prevented if we act early. Now, let's talk about the eyes. High glucose damages the small blood vessels in the retina. This is called diabetic retinopathy and can lead to vision loss. Many people discover they have diabetes only after they have already lost some of their sight. That's why I insist, don't wait until you have severe symptoms. Take care of your diet and control your glucose levels before reaching that point. And we cannot forget the nervous system. Excess sugar in the blood damages the nerves, especially in the feet and hands. This is what we call diabetic neuropathy, tingling, loss of sensation, burning pain. At first, it is bothersome, but over time it can lead to ulcers, infections, and in extreme cases, amputations. I know all this may sound harsh, but I want you to see it from another perspective. Just as poorly controlled diabetes damages your entire body, reversing diabetes protects your entire body. When you lower your glucose with proper nutrition, you're not just improving a number on the test. You're protecting your liver, your heart, your kidneys, your eyes, your nerves. You're gaining quality and years of life. I want you to imagine yourself 5 years from now. There are 2 possible futures. In one, you continue on the same path and perhaps face serious complications. In the other, you decide today to change your diet and lifestyle, and in 5 years, you are a healthier person with more energy, enjoying your family without fear. The choice is in your hands. And now I want to ask you, which of these organs concerns you the most? The heart, the kidneys, the eyes, the liver? Write it in the comments, because I want to prepare specific content to help you protect each of them. You understood that carbohydrates are the main problem when we talk about type 2 diabetes. But I know that right now many of you are thinking, okay, Edu, but then what do I eat day to day? How do I breakfast? What do I prepare for lunch? What do I take for dinner? Let me guide you through a full day of low-carb eating with simple and tasty examples. Let's start with breakfast. Forget about juices, bread, cereals, and cookies. All of these spike blood sugar. An ideal breakfast could be 2 scrambled eggs with avocado and unsweetened coffee. If you want variety, you can make an omelet with spinach and cheese. Are you in a hurry? Then natural yogurt without sugar with nuts and seeds is another excellent option. The important thing is to avoid blood sugar spikes. Let's move on to lunch. This is where many people get confused because they are used to filling their plate with rice, pasta, or potatoes. The key is to change the base. Imagine a plate with grilled chicken, a green leafy salad with olive oil and avocado, and a little cheese. Want variety? Beef, fish, hard-boiled eggs, steamed broccoli, sautéed zucchini. All of these fill you up, nourish you, and don't spike your blood sugar. The afternoon snack. Many people fall here because they feel hungry and reach for cookies or sweet fruits. But there are better options. A handful of almonds, some olives, a piece of cheese, or even a coffee with cream without sugar. These are small but powerful foods that keep you full without breaking your blood sugar control. Dinner. The key here is lightness. No bread with milk or cereal bowls. A good example of dinner is a salmon fillet with cucumber and avocado salad. Another option is pumpkin cream with cheese. If you want something quick, eggs with sautéed vegetables also work perfectly. And for those who ask me, what about dessert, Edu? Of course, you can have dessert. The idea is not to live without pleasure. What you should do is change the ingredients. For example, a chocolate mousse made with pure cocoa, avocado, and a carbohydrate-free sweetener. Or sugar-free gelatin with whipped cream. There are many delicious and safe recipes. Now I want you to think about something important. Did you notice that on this full day there was no need to go hungry? There were no boring dishes. There were no impossible restrictions. There were smart substitutions. And that is what makes this lifestyle sustainable. Also, let me give you a practical tip. Plan your meals in advance. If you leave it to decide in the moment, you're most likely to end up eating the first thing you find, and that usually means carbohydrates. But if you already have a plan, if your food is prepared or at least decided, it's much easier to stay on track. And now I ask you, which part of the day is the hardest for you? Breakfast, lunch, dinner, or snacks? Write it in the comments because I want to prepare specific menus for each time of day in upcoming videos. I know that so far everything sounds very good when we think about home, cooking our own recipes. But real life is full of birthdays, work lunches, family dinners, and parties where food is abundant and almost always loaded with carbohydrates. So, how do you keep your glucose under control without feeling isolated from the world? First, let's talk about restaurants. The key here is to learn to look at the menu with different eyes. If you see a dish that includes rice, pasta, or potatoes, ask to have it replaced with a salad or steamed vegetables. Almost always, the restaurant can do this without any problem. Choose meats, fish, seafood, eggs, or salads as your base. Avoid sweet sauces because they often contain hidden sugar. And if the bread basket arrives at the table, remember, that bread may seem harmless, but for your body, it's like eating spoonfuls of sugar. Now, birthdays and family parties. Here, the challenge is even greater because you don't want to seem rude or miss out on the celebration. My simple recommendation is, eat something before leaving the house. If you arrive hungry, it will be much harder to resist the cake or fried snacks. If you arrive already full, you'll be able to choose better and eat less. Also, focus on proteins, cheese, ham, meats, stuffed eggs. And if you want a small piece of cake so as not to seem rude, eat it without guilt, but let it be the exception, not the rule. What matters is what you do every day, not a special occasion. Regarding work meetings or lunches outside the home, planning is best. If you know there will be pizza, you can bring your own food or just eat the toppings, avoiding the crust. If there are buffets, fill your plate with salad and proteins and skip the pasta and rice. It's not about being weird. It's about taking care of your health. And I want to tell you something very important. Don't feel obligated to give long explanations to everyone. Many times people insist, "Why don't you eat cake? Why don't you drink juice?" You can simply respond, "I'm taking care of my health." Period. You don't need to convince anyone or get into arguments. Another powerful strategy is to bring your own healthy option when you're invited to a party. If you bring a delicious salad, a low-carb dessert, or a baked meat dish, you not only ensure you have something to eat, but you also inspire others. You'd be surprised how many times people taste your dish and say, "Wow, this is delicious. Pass me the recipe." Finally, I want you to remember something. Life is meant to be enjoyed. It's not about living in fear of food, but about learning to choose. A person who manages to reverse diabetes doesn't live confined. They live freely because they know how to handle each situation. And now I ask you, what is your biggest social challenge? Restaurants, parties, birthdays, or family gatherings? Write it in the comments because I want to prepare specific tips for each case. In the previous section, we talked about how to handle parties, restaurants, and social situations. And I am sure you noticed something. In all those occasions, besides the food, there are always drinks. Sodas, juices, cocktails, beers. That's why I want to bring you to a topic that seems secondary, but is fundamental: hydration. Many people underestimate the impact of what they drink on their glycemic control. It's useless to avoid bread if you accompany it with a glass of orange juice. It's pointless to reject pasta if you then drink 3 glasses of soda. The beverage is as important as the food. So, what is the foundation? Water. Water is the most powerful and cheapest liquid for a diabetic. It has no sugar, no calories, helps the kidneys eliminate excess glucose, and keeps your body functioning optimally. Now, I want to clarify a myth. You don't need to drink liters and liters of water excessively. That famous rule of 35 milliliters per kilogram of weight does not apply to everyone. Drinking in excess can even dehydrate you because you eliminate essential electrolytes by urinating too much. And here we come to another key point: electrolytes. When you reduce carbohydrates in your diet, your body also reduces insulin levels. That is excellent for reversing resistance, but at the same time, lower insulin causes you to eliminate more sodium and water through urination. That's why many people starting a low-carb diet feel dizzy, tired, or have headaches. It's not that the diet is bad, it's that they lack electrolytes. The main ones are sodium, potassium, and magnesium. How to ensure them? Simply, add a little quality salt to your meals. Eat avocados, which are rich in potassium. Include leafy green vegetables and nuts to obtain magnesium. And if needed, you can supplement with a magnesium supplement, always under professional guidance. Think about this. Hydration is not just water, it's water plus electrolytes. That is the formula to feel energized, without dizziness and weakness. And how does this connect with social life? Very simple. When you're at a party and offered juice, soda, or beer, remember that your best option is water, sparkling water, or an unsweetened infusion. And if you feel lacking in energy or dizzy, many times it's not due to a lack of carbohydrates, but a lack of electrolytes. In summary, take care of your plate, but also take care of your glass. What you drink is as important as what you eat. And now I want you to tell me, what do you usually drink the most during the day? Water, juice, soda, coffee? Write it in the comments, because I want to help you choose better in each case. In the previous block, we saw that lack of water and electrolytes can cause fatigue, dizziness, and headaches. But I want to go further, because chronic fatigue is one of the symptoms that most affects people with diabetes. Many tell me, Edu, even though I sleep 8 hours, I wake up exhausted. I have no strength to work, to exercise, or even to enjoy my family. And this has a clear explanation. When you have insulin resistance, glucose stays circulating in your blood, but doesn't enter your cells properly. It's like having fuel in the tank, but with the key broken. The result is that sugar is high in the blood, but low inside the cells, which are the ones that really need the energy. That's why you feel that constant fatigue. The good news is that when you change your diet, you not only lower your glucose levels, you also restore energy to your cells. How? When you reduce carbohydrates and increase high-quality fats and proteins, your body begins to use fat as an energy source. And fat is like a clean, long-lasting fuel. Unlike sugar, which gives you a quick spike and then a sharp drop, fat provides stable energy for hours. Let me give you a practical example. If you have bread with jam and juice for breakfast, by 10 in the morning you're already hungry and sleepy. If you have eggs with avocado for breakfast, you can go until lunch with steady energy, without crashes. Do you see the difference? And it's not just about physical energy. We also talk about mental energy. Many patients tell me that after starting a low-carb diet, they feel their mind clearer, more focused. This happens because ketone bodies, which your body produces when using fat for energy, are an excellent fuel for the brain. Additionally, when you have more energy, it becomes easier to move, exercise, socialize, and work. And that extra movement feeds back into improvement because exercise also helps glucose enter cells more effectively. It's a virtuous circle. You eat well, have more energy, move more, and that movement further improves your metabolism. That's why I want you to take this message. Proper nutrition is not only a treatment for diabetes, but also a way to regain your vitality and zest for life. Imagine waking up energized, without a headache, without that mental fog that accompanies you all day. That is possible, and I have seen it hundreds of times in patients who decided to change their way of eating. And now I want to ask you, how is your energy today? Do you feel more physical fatigue, mental fatigue, or both? Tell me in the comments, because I want to prepare specific content to help you regain that vitality. So far, we've talked about nutrition, hydration, energy, electrolytes, organs, tests. All of that is essential, but I want you to understand something. None of this matters if you don't have the emotional strength to maintain the change. Many people tell me, Edu, I know what I should eat, I know I should walk more, I know I should sleep better, but I can't do it. And here is the key. It's not a lack of information, it's a lack of motivation and emotional strategies. Food is not just nutrition. It is culture, affection, memory. The bread you ate at your grandmother's house, the birthday cake, the coffee with cookies you share with your friends. That's why changing your diet is not just a physical act, it's also an emotional act. The first thing I want to tell you is that you don't need to do it perfectly from day one. It's not about a strict diet where if you slip up, everything is ruined. It's about a learning journey. If today you manage to change one meal, you've taken a step. If tomorrow you change two, you've progressed even more. The important thing is not to stop. It's also essential to have a strong reason. Saying, I want to lower my glucose is just a number. Your reason must be personal. I want to see my grandchildren grow up. I want to travel without fear of complications. I want to regain my energy to work and enjoy life. When your motivation is strong, any sacrifice becomes easier. Another important point is emotional support. Changing alone is difficult. Changing with someone is much easier. That's why I always recommend sharing your journey with someone, your partner, a friend, a support group. Even here in the comments, when you share your story, you're already creating a community and receiving motivation from others. And let me tell you a truth, there will be relapses. There will be days when you eat what you shouldn't, when you feel powerless. Nothing happens. The difference between those who manage to reverse diabetes and those who don't is not never failing, but getting up quickly after each fall. A mistake does not define your path. What matters is consistency. Additionally, I want you to think about self-image. Many people with diabetes carry guilt, with the idea that the disease is a punishment or a personal failure. I tell you clearly, it's not your fault. You were a victim of an environment full of ultra-processed food, contradictory messages, and guidelines that for years recommended what actually worsened the disease. Guilt doesn't help you. What helps you is responsibility. Understanding that, even if it's not your fault, it is your responsibility to change from now on. I want you to imagine this change not as a sacrifice, but as a gift to yourself. Every time you choose water instead of juice, every time you choose meat and salad instead of bread and pasta, you are gifting years of life to your future. And now I ask you, what is your biggest emotional challenge on this journey? Is it willpower, social pressure, anxiety, guilt? Tell me in the comments, because I want to help you find practical tools to overcome it. We have already talked about the importance of nutrition, hydration, electrolytes, energy, and also emotional strength to maintain the change. But the question many people ask is, how do I apply all this in my daily life? Let me show you what a balanced day might look like for someone on the path to reversing type 2 diabetes. The morning. Start with a good low-carb breakfast. Eggs, avocado, cheese, plain yogurt without sugar with seeds. No juices, no bread, no cookies. Accompany with water or unsweetened coffee. After breakfast, if you can, take a 20-minute walk. This not only activates your body, but also helps the glucose from that first meal enter the cells better. The afternoon. For lunch, always choose a base of proteins and vegetables. Meat, chicken, fish, eggs, along with salads or sautéed vegetables. Avoid rice, pasta, and bread. After lunch, another short walk. You don't need a gym or hours of exercise. 15 or 20 minutes already make a big difference in your glucose levels. If you're hungry between meals, remember that low-carb snacks are your allies. A handful of nuts, a piece of cheese, some olives. No cookies or sweet fruits. The night. Dinner should be light. Fish, salad, vegetable soup with cheese. Avoid eating very late and, above all, avoid carbohydrates at night because your body will be less active and won't burn that glucose. After dinner, another short walk if possible. And when it's time to sleep, avoid bright screens and distractions. A good sleep is medicine for your body. Rest. Sleeping well is as important as eating well. If you sleep little or poorly, your body produces more cortisol, which raises glucose levels. Keep regular schedules and create a calm environment to rest. I want you to notice something. This day has nothing extreme. There are no impossible prohibitions or exhausting routines. There are conscious choices and simple movements. The consistency of these small actions is what produces great results. Imagine following this routine for a week. You'll see how your glucose starts to decrease, how your energy increases, how your mind feels clearer. Now imagine doing it for a month, 3 months, a year. That is the path of reversal. And I want to ask you a question. Which part of your day is the hardest to organize? Breakfast, eating out, dinner, sleep? Write it in the comments because I want to prepare specific content to help you during that moment when you find it most difficult. You understood that diabetes is not just high blood sugar. It is a condition that, if not reversed, can lead to serious complications. And I want to talk to you about 3 very common ones: fatty liver, hypertension, and diabetic foot. Fatty liver. The liver is a silent organ. You can have it filled with fat and feel nothing for years. But gradually, that fat inflames the liver and damages its functions. What causes it? Mainly excess fructose, which is in juices, sodas, desserts, and excessive fruits. Fatty liver is closely linked to insulin resistance. The good news is that it is reversible. I have seen patients who, after 3 months of a low-carbohydrate diet, significantly reduce the fat in their liver. Not with pills, not with surgery, but with real food. Hypertension. High blood pressure often goes hand in hand with type 2 diabetes. For a long time, we were made to believe that salt was the main culprit. Today, we know that's not the case. The real villain is excess insulin. When you have insulin resistance, your body retains more sodium and water, which increases blood pressure. Additionally, inflammation caused by carbohydrates damages blood vessels. When you reduce carbohydrates, not only does your glucose decrease, but your blood pressure also drops. I have seen people who, in a few weeks, were able to reduce or even stop hypertension medications under medical supervision, simply because their insulin levels decreased. Diabetic foot. This is one of the most painful topics because diabetic foot can lead to amputations. It all starts with neuropathy. Damaged nerves cause loss of sensation in the feet. A small cut or blister can go unnoticed. That wound becomes infected, circulation is poor, and soon you have a difficult-to-heal ulcer. Did you know that most diabetes-related amputations could be avoided with early control? Check your feet every day, wear comfortable shoes, carefully cut your nails, and most importantly, keep your blood sugar under control. Diabetic foot does not appear suddenly. It is the result of years of poor management. I want you to remember this. Poorly controlled diabetes destroys silently, but reverse diabetes protects. Every healthy food choice you make is a step to avoid fatty liver, hypertension, and diabetic foot. And now I want to ask you, do you know someone who has already suffered from any of these complications? Or have you noticed signs in your liver, blood pressure, or feet? Tell me in the comments, because sharing your experience can save others who are on the same path. I want to close this program with a deep reflection. Today, we traveled together a long road, full of information, examples, and real experiences. We talked about metabolic surgery and saw that it is not a magic solution, but an extreme resource with risks and consequences. We analyzed medications, which can help control glucose, but never solve the root of the problem. We learned that the true key lies in nutrition. That reducing carbohydrates is not a punishment, but a way to restore the body's natural ability to use energy. That with eggs, meats, fish, avocados, cheeses, and vegetables, one can live with pleasure and health. We saw that laboratory tests are not just numbers, but signals that, if interpreted correctly, show years before insulin resistance is already present. And we understood that the earlier you act, the easier it is to reverse diabetes. We explored the complications: fatty liver, hypertension, diabetic foot, kidney problems, eye issues, heart problems, and nerve damage. All of this sounds tough, but it is also a warning. If you do nothing, these are the consequences. But if you change your diet and lifestyle, you not only avoid these complications, but also gain energy, mental clarity, and quality of life. We talked about emotions, about how guilt, anxiety, and social pressure can be bigger barriers than any bread or dessert. And we understood that change is not about perfection, but about consistency. That it's not your fault you've come this far, but it is your responsibility to decide where you will go from now on. We also saw what's practical: how to organize a full day of eating, how to handle restaurants and parties, how to stay well hydrated, how to sleep better, and how to move more. And we discovered that it's not about extreme changes, but about smart choices repeated every day. I want you to take this message with you. Type 2 diabetes is not a condemnation. It's not a lifelong sentence. It's a wake-up call from your body, asking you for a change. And that change is possible, real, and I have seen hundreds of people achieve it. The future is in your hands. You can choose to continue believing that diabetes is progressive and only controlled with medication, or you can choose the path of reversal, freedom, and recovered health. And now I want to invite you to reflect. What decision will you make today? Not tomorrow, not next week. Today. Because every meal you make is a vote for your health or for your disease. If this content helped you, I ask that you support this project. Give a like to this video, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to the Edu Diabetes and Espanol channel. Your support makes it possible for more people to access this information that can transform lives. And finally, tell me in the comments, what was the most impactful part of everything we discussed today? I want to read your words. I want to know which part of this journey resonates with you, because together we can create a community that not only controls, but reverses type 2 diabetes.